So, Jackson, back on the channel after a little while. But you're one of the main reasons 3D even has a sort of AI quantum vertical of the portfolio. And diving straight in, what made you pick sort of Dynex and HyperCycle as your main positions all those years ago?
Yeah, we're quite excited about. I mean, I guess one of the things that we try and do is really see where the world is going from a, technology perspective, as well as kind of, in different industries and try and kind of position ourselves before that happens. I mean, for HyperCycle, we got involved, before that ChatGPT moment in November 2022. We got involved through Tufi, who we've been involved with for many years through the Toda protocol. I believe you've interviewed Hassan Khan, who's the CEO of Toda Q, which is a sister company to HyperCycle, based kind of on this underlying Toda technology that is super scalable, great security, can do things peer to peer. So basically all these benefits of blockchain without really kind of having all the drawbacks, and it's ledgerless, so it doesn't have the ledger that grows, and becomes slower with time, and without kind of compromising security. So, we're a big believer in that technology. And Tufi mentioned he was starting a new company that was all around AI to AI transactions and payments and communication. And we really liked that idea. And obviously that ended up, today everyone knows these agents are going out in the world, Claude, all and so forth. We saw this pretty early on and the way things were going. And so, it always interested us. And now obviously the moment's here. And, we can go a bit more in detail, obviously, I'm sure we will later, about
Mhm.
HyperCycle and what makes it unique, even and especially today with all the AIs going on. And then, in quantum was kind of a special situation where this deal was brought to us, and among many others as prospective investments. And we really kind of like this, where, I always knew quantum had its issues around scaling up, and how fragile the systems could be. And people have been saying 5 years away for quantum for the last 20 years, it feels like. And we still have these issues. And so we saw this as a very unique situation, where it can be difficult for people to wrap their head around, where you might be able to actually get quantum outcomes, quantum speed ups, without actually having to use quantum architecture, basically using classical or semi-classical computing to do that. And that sounded unique, almost impossible, but we've done our homework. We've been with the company. We've worked with enough people who've looked at this, where this is kind of happening. This is real. And so obviously quantum now is massive, but the problem is none of these companies are have anything of real commercial scalable value, whereas we believe that this company's really overcome that in a very unique way. So, it's companies that are very unique, that we think are big ideas but are executable, in terms of they're not something that's 100 years down the road. There's a real path to commerciality. And I think we've been pretty good at picking the companies as well as the timing for these industries, whether it is AI, and then ChatGPT and agents, and
Mm.
now everyone's talking about agent to agent
Yeah.
communication and so forth, or on the quantum side. But we believe HyperCycle and Dynex, which we'll talk about, are still going, and especially going to be key drivers of these industries going forward.
Absolutely. I mean, the word AI agent or agent, I've seen sort of, especially in the last month, just be popping up everywhere. Even just the other day, I used Manus AI to build didn't have time to help my sister build her website, so I used Manus AI and it did it in about 2 minutes. But then combine that with hypercycle and intercommunication, it's actually really really amazing. And then yeah, the quantum side of it, it's scary power. I remember the first interview that we had with Dynex, and it's scary power, potential talk of even password hacking and things like that, which, you kind of then have to hope that, okay, it's the good guys that get control of this tech, and because it's decentralized, obviously, people can be
Yeah,
more
they have a
confident.
very strong ethics component
Mm,
to this, because they know how powerful their technology can be, and they're very cognizant of the benefits, but also the potential risks, and they are very careful to be preventative about those potential concerns, and really focus on the positive use cases. And they've taken a lot of measures to ensure that going forward, because this is an extremely powerful technology.
Absolutely, yeah. And I guess for people watching, it must be really kind of encouraging for them. Obviously, you guys are an investor just like them, just like the people watching. So you kind of taken the steps to get in at the same levels as they have. And, with HyperCycle, we'll touch on later, all the different tech stack there. But before we get onto that, maybe just touch on exactly sort of the size of the positionings of both these companies for 3D.
So we don't on the Dynex side, we don't disclose kind of the ownership. I mean, we have certain preset criteria for that was set many years ago. For HyperCycle, it's a bit more complicated in the fact that we disclose kind of our token ownership, but it's kind of not the full story,
Yeah.
because while there are tokens, the tokens on their own, they need to be combined with nodes, which are basically software bundles. And basically, when these tokens and nodes are combined, they're able to become almost the network that enables AIs to be kind of put inside these software bundles to be able to communicate and transact. So these things come together to enable the transaction layer. But in terms of for HyperCycle, why that's important is because when you own the tokens and you own the nodes, which 3D owns both, they become revenue producing, in terms of when AIs are put inside these nodes, and they communicate. Every time they communicate with each other and transact, the people who own these bundles, software bundles, will get a percentage of that revenue. And so you can imagine where AIs are now becoming the majority of transactions on the internet, transacting trillions of times per second. Even if they're for fractions of a penny each time, these things can pretty much add up. And the longer you have these nodes in operation, it's, there's these things called reputation scores, where basically your software has a better reputation, and so more likely to potentially get the transaction than maybe other AIs with other software bundles in there. And so there's a lot of things that go into it, but I guess the important thing here is that these nodes and tokens can be revenue driven, in terms of this could be potentially revenue that 3D could produce as it gets in the future. And in fact, there is just the starting of that now, as well as the potential equity value, because you could also, in addition to getting revenue from these nodes, they have a certain value, these nodes, right? If you're getting a certain percent per year and it's pretty stable, you can sell those nodes for a certain multiple. And so there's a couple ways of potentially earning value on those things. And so within these multiple layers, within HyperCycle, 3D has participated.
No one was using AI, well, not to the level that I've seen it. I mean, every single person I know now is either using one, a GPT, Claude, Perplexity. If everyone just imagines that and then imagines all of that processing, all of that data, and then there's going to have to be a sort of interconnecting party. I mean,
Yeah, like I mean, the great thing about HyperCycle, and people are always like, well, isn't ChatGPT, or isn't Gemini, or isn't Claude gonna work? And what's more likely to generate more value, more intelligence, each one of those things individually, or them all together, and all of them
Mm,
being able to communicate? Like, there are certain things that are always going to have certain strengths and certain weaknesses. Some things are going to be better at others than not. You can imagine, a certain AI that's maybe really good at general knowledge, but you want it to basically read some invoice you have, so it needs some optical character recognition. So, this AI might not be able to do this. I'm like, I could summarize some information for you, but I can't read it. So it can automatically go find the AI in this internet of AIs,
mm,
find the one that says, yes, I can do optical character recognition, pay me 10 cents, I'll give it to you in 10 milliseconds,
mm.
and then provide that to your end customer. And you can imagine how these individual AIs can become like nodes in a or neurons in a brain where you can have multiple layers of this. And so and there's no intermediaries. And so this becomes extremely important for latency and cost when you're trying to transact between multiple different AIs that are built on different infrastructures with different companies where there's no blockchain, there's no bank taking fees, there's no latency going through those third-party providers. You can truly do this peer-to-peer. And so, the sky is the limit, use your imagination of what that could potentially enable. I think that could be extremely powerful, even more so than the current agents today. And another aspect that's extremely important for this, perhaps the most so, you have, the Moltbot moment, and you have, these agents that are able to do all these things, which is great. But, two major concerns is really your data, which you mentioned, and your security. It's can become very easy and there's been nightmare situations where people's computer information gets stolen or given away, or their hard drives get wiped.
Mm.
And so, HyperCycle can enable a much more secure environment where you can own your own data, own your information, and be able to actually truly transact in a secure environment. So, imagine, the Claude bots of the world, but something you can actually trust. You don't need to get a dedicated laptop with your own login credentials and so forth, and you actually control,
Mm.
the information, across multiple different platforms. And this is starting to be realized from HyperCycle through a project called Mosaic, which we can get more into now or later.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a really good point. And actually, it's a good point on privacy because I know Trump banned, was it Anthropic? So you can see how there's still some concerns around that. But I also remember you mentioned altogether, and that's kind of Hypercycle's USP. I remember the perplexity ad. It was all about okay, speaking to someone who's got GPT and saying, "Well, we've already got GPT in our AI," so it's kind of a bit laughable. So it's the same with Hypercycle. They're going a step further and saying, "What about?" the totally different types of AI and connecting those
Mhm.
together. So that's a really, really, really good point. Just one last thing on Hypercycle before we go back to Dynex. That they did a huge JV with the South Korean government, it's a multi-billion dollar headline. Um, what are these things and how do they sort of create value for 3D? And is that like a done deal now?
So there's only what I can talk about is what's been kind of shared publicly. What I can say is that one of the goals or objectives of Hypercycle is really to deal at the national level and partner with governments to basically bring this Internet of AI at that level and be able to have government partners come in and help grow the ecosystem, because this is a massive opportunity for everyone to be able to partake in the Internet of AI. This isn't something that is just going to be owned by Silicon Valley, elite groups. This is something that's going to be available to the masses, where all countries can benefit and transact. And it's just like you wouldn't have wanted to miss out on the internet. This is the internet of AI, which could be even bigger, because AIs never sleep. They can transact much more than humans can. It's going to be the future. And so there was the press release that HyperCycle did with South Korea. I know that they're going to be working with many other countries as well to get involved. And this isn't a small project. This is a very big idea, as you can see from that. And obviously they're getting buy-in.
Absolutely. No, I think that's enough proof in the pudding for all those doubters that we had maybe 6 to 12 months ago. I mean, just now on to Dynex. Walk us through the thesis there. Obviously, everyone knows quantum. What is neuromorphic quantum computing? Is it kind of network effects? Is that what it is? Tell us more about that, and also tell us more about the chip and how that sort of really fit into 3D's strategy.
This is great to talk about. It's very interesting. I love the technology here. So it's best to maybe separate first the neuromorphic from the quantum. So without getting too technical, neuromorphic is kind of more like how the brain works, like the
Mhm.
human brain, biological brains.
Mhm.
Computers, the architecture, how it's set up today, and how it's been set up for many decades is very different. One of the key issues is called the von Neumann bottleneck. It's basically the where the processing and where the memory take place are in different locations. And so this creates a huge amount of inefficiency, or a ton of power consumption because you're constantly having the information go back and forth to retrieve the memory to use for the processing. And so this can create, like I said, latency, energy inefficiencies. Neuromorphic is more brain-like, where the processing and the memory take place at the same time. And so this enables potentially for extremely low power, like just, your human brain runs on 20 watts. This thing, the
Mhm.
Apollo chip, which is Dynex's chip, is similar, low powered, but extremely fast and efficient. And so, that's the neuromorphic, and the quantum. Quantum computing is interesting in the fact that it has the promise to really speed up transaction or calculations for certain problems. It's not the be all and end all. The best thing way I kind of like to think about, quantum computing is that when you have combinatorial explosion problems, things that are very complex, things that a supercomputer you can never imagine doing. So that can be, simulating atomic level chemistry. It can be optimization problems in finance, figuring out which stocks to
Mhm.
buy and how to, rebalance them. It's, transportation problems in terms for logistics and so on and so forth. These are really great problems for quantum to solve because quantum can do things and explore a much larger space of possible solutions in a much shorter period of time. And in a way, they're really able to do things in parallel. And so Dynex has basically taken the quantum principles of things like entanglement and superposition, where things can be influence each other instantaneously and can be in multiple states at the same time. And really applying the essence of that, and they've developed a couple different pillars to emulate these processes. One is just using traditional GPUs. They've created a software platform called Dynex Solve. And what that basically does is it emulates these quantum processes, but just on classical computing. And what they've shown is that they can get extremely fast speed ups, outperforming quantum computing, showing that what they're able to achieve on things like what are called the traveling salesman problem, which is like basically a logistics problem, which is, let's say you have 50 stops, in the city of, call it New York, and you need to figure out what's the optimal way so you get there and spend the least amount of time. Not a very easy solution because classical computers have to basically brute force it. What's kind of all the different ways. Well, the number of streets in New York is when you think about all the possible permutations is almost feels like infinite. And so a classical computer could never do that. Whereas, quantum, that's the hope. The problem with quantum is that it's very easy to destabilize the system, especially as you scale it. And so that's been one of the major challenges is how to go from what are called qubits, which are basically like, normal computers have bits, zeros, and ones. Qubits are the quantum equivalent where they can be zero and one at the same time,
Mhm.
which enables them to have that kind of quantum speed up of calculations. And so the problem is that the more qubits you add to a system, the less likely they are to be stable, and more likely to collapse. And then you'd have to rerun the calculation again, and this becomes exponentially harder the more qubits you add. The benefit of Dynex And what they did here is that they by using just traditional hardware, you can scale up the hardware. I mean, there are a number of GPUs out there, and the more GPUs you use, it doesn't become harder to use them. And because this is all classical based, and so you don't have those same issues, but you're still using this Dynex software that provides the same benefit and outcome. So you're getting, the speed up of quantum, you're getting the answers of quantum, but you're not getting the issues with it. And so that's on the GPU base. And then they developed a chip called our first chip in the series is called Apollo. And basically, that you could think of this as even a supercharged version. So an even much more faster and impressive version of the software, which is like an analog chip that is mimicking the quantum processes and being able to get quantum outcomes, doing able to do mass parallelization and being able to do things that no other quantum computing company can do. They recently came out with a paper that showed that compared to D-Wave, which is actually a Canadian-based company, multi-billion dollar company, it was able, when you're doing a benchmark comparison, was able to find, a much better answer in 1/100th of the time
Mm.
and using, room temperature, low power, whereas, all these quantum, like D-Wave it's super cooled, very expensive. So this is very exciting. Once again, Apollo is also likely to be scalable. So basically, what Dynex is offering is quantum solutions today, not 5, 10 years down the road, and also an actual viable path to scalability. And so we're extremely excited about this because, at the end of the day, all these quantum companies that have multi-billion valuations, none of them have real commercial applicability. They're toy problems, they're research problems, they're the promise of, they'll be able to do this down the road. And, the things I say is one is this is available today. Even if the other quantum companies were available today, this can be done at room temperature,
Mm.
scalable, and low power compared to these very expensive machines, super cooled, and issues that I don't see how are going to go away on the scalability issues. So in our minds, this is the most interesting quantum company. People like to say, well, it's not true quantum; it's just mimicking those effects. But at the end of the day, who cares? I mean,
The
what
outcome's
matters
the
is
same. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And they'll be able to scale. So even if they had 90% of the benefits, but they could scale linearly, whereas in complexity compared to exponentially, the benefits become very apparent as you get bigger. And so this room temperature scalable solution with true quantum outcomes, I think is a major discovery, actually. I
Mm.
think many people think, you have to look a certain way to get a certain type of answer when it's really a lot. And this is, you see this innovation all the time where it's something totally unexpected that leads to the outcome. It's something that nobody really saw coming. And, we believe that's what Dynex has done here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, when you mentioned D-Wave there, it must be really humiliating for them if 99 out of 100 of the time they're being beaten by something like Apollo. And yeah, they must be looking at ways to trying to collaborate because there's no other options here. But just going back a few steps, I mean, rather than the sort of microchip level, maybe from like a 30,000 feet level for a non-technical person. If you had to summarize Dynex in one word, I mean, not one word, one sentence, how would you do that?
So I believe that Dynex is really what they do is they provide quantum outcomes using classical or semi-classical means at room temperature. Now, really, what does that mean? It means they are very good at providing optimization type problems. Where where traditional computing would normally fail. You know,
Yeah.
the when people kind of look at GPUs are really good at matrix multiplication. They're really good at things called gradient descent, which is basically you can imagine a ball rolling down a valley, and that ball is trying to find the lowest point on that valley. I mean, that's what machine learning is all about, is finding that lowest point. And it's really good at doing that when there's one valley. The
Mm.
problem is reality is much more complex, and there's many valleys. And I know I'm getting a bit abstract here, but it's important to kind of realize that if you think about solutions and better solutions as, like, in this mountainous landscape, and the better solutions are the deeper valleys, and the less good solutions are the more shallower ones. And with matrix multiplication and gradient descent, you start at one mountain and you roll down it, and that's your solution. But if you keep rolling down that same mountain, you're going to end up in that same solution. What Dynex enables, and the promise of quantum, is that you might have a very what's called a rugged landscape, many valleys and peaks, some high, some low. It can tunnel through those mountains to find what the lowest valley is, or at least a much better optimum,
Yeah.
or lower valley than what is traditionally available. So yeah, when there's one peak, GPUs are really good. But when there's many peaks and valleys, like when you think about optimization problems, when there's many different solutions, then this is where Dynex can become really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and then there have been some serious, I mean, to be honest, that's a really good explanation. It reminds me of the New
Yeah,
York
sorry, that was
street.
more than one sentence, but sometimes it requires more than that.
Yeah. And actually, I think you had covered that earlier with the sort of New York streets and things like that. It's helpful. And just on more sort of news, it's Dynex has transitioned from kind of like a crypto utility token and all the stigma that comes with that to a security token. Can you tell us like more what's happening there and the transition?
Yeah, so the company originally was actually blockchain based for the reason that and which totally made sense, which is why don't we leverage all of existing GPUs that people have and let them run our software, and then reward them for basically doing the calculations for the on their GPUs for the software. And that would give them access to a tremendous amount of compute, and that would be able to solve problems that people who wanted to use the platform wanted to solve. you know the issue is that the crypto community in the world is very different than the quantum community in the world. Like, I mean, they're both very sophisticated technologies that it's very difficult to find people who will understand both, or who are comfortable with both.
Mhm.
And also, as the technology developed, as the Apollo chip, for example, developed, the need for that infrastructure changed, where, and even on the GPU software side, there's been updates to it where, we really don't need that many GPUs. You don't need to have it in a decentralized format. And there's a bunch of other reasons as well. So for that, they decided to transition from a token, and it's going to be converted to a security token, which is going from having ownership in crypto, which doesn't really have the same protections and rights as equity, to a security token, which is equity. It's in a token format, but it's still equity. So you have rights. Now you have ownership in the company and exposure to the actual IP that the company has developed.
Yeah.
And that will be on a security token exchange, presumably. And then they mentioned this, it's called Paragon, this announcement that explains and details all of this. They're going to convert the security token, or you'll have the option to convert security token to a regular share certificate on
Mm.
an internationally recognized stock.
Wow, that's good, and I can see why this is sort of happening. Natural progression from the chip to this, almost positioning more like D-Wave and other quantum leaders, and that means that you can attract sort of more institutional capital, and obviously that tease with a stock market listing. What can that sort of mean for the valuation? It sounds like it could increase the valuation massively. And then how does sort of 3D's position then adapt and benefit from the transition?
Well, yeah, like I mentioned, I mean, once you go from crypto to equity, you're actually getting ownership in the company. So I
Yeah.
mean, it has all the rights and benefits as an equity holder. So now you actually have that exposure to the IP, the revenues, the growth. I mean, it becomes, I don't need to tell you or the listeners, like, people know the value of
Mhm.
the equity and owning equity. And so that we believe is going to be,
Mhm.
a major catalyst compared to the token where, it was just a different business model where you also didn't have exposure to the IP or
Yeah.
the revenues. It was the tokenomics model, which we don't need to really get into on this discussion, but I think the equity transition is much more appropriate for this type of company. And like you mentioned, there is a tremendous amount of capital and interest for quantum companies in the public markets right
Mhm.
now. Crypto is very different, but I think that the respect that they deserve they'll achieve in the equity markets.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point as well. And then just going back to the Apollo chip, I know you covered it a little bit there. And then in our other videos as well, we've kind of talked about it. The chip that fits in your hand runs at room temperature. You mentioned a really good fact there about how the brain runs at 21 watts, and it's similar to that, which is a really amazing explanation. And uses, less power than a phone charger. Somehow keeps up with $100 million supercomputers that they need sort of outer space cooling and all this sorts of crazy stuff. It sounds almost as an investor, as you guys as an investor, or maybe some of the investors listening, those who are in already, sounds almost too good to be true. So why do you believe it? And presumably that'll be the same answer that people watching will have as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the case with innovation. And listen, people are skeptical, and you're going to always have healthy skepticism and to be proven until proven otherwise. But I think we've barely scratched the surface in terms of what they have done and what we discussed. I mean, they have come out with third-party validation reports across a variety of benchmarks showing out performance to any other quantum computing company. They've come out with a spectacular paper on weather prediction and being able to show that they could predict extreme events like tornadoes, fog, hail, with like 94% accuracy 14 days in advance,
Mm,
which nobody can come close to on that. They've done the same things for pollution, for showing even with LLMs that they can improve the intelligence with a fraction of the number of parameters using the quantum advantage. And so, there becomes a point where, all of these papers, all of this data, becomes overwhelming, showing that this is, real and doing what it says it does. I think the third party validation was extremely important. And
mm,
I'm sure there'll be more to come, and at the end of the day, the ultimate testimony will, of course, be from customers. And showing that. But like with any innovation, it's always, people don't believe, and we've seen this so many times where companies pour billions of dollars into something, and then someone comes up with something that maybe they made in their garage that completely
mm,
disrupts the whole industry. And so we think that something similar is happening here. We
mm,
think that the teams, it's obviously a very intelligent
mm,
group of researchers that have pulled together different fields of research and found a way to combine it to make something extremely unique and obviously outperforming anything that's out there on the market. So we've been involved in this project for a few years. We're big believers now in this. I mean, we've done a lot of learning, we've done a lot of research. We've also sent it to people in our network who are also extremely intelligent. And
I
the
agree.
the big feedback is like if this is true, like this is obviously an extremely a very big deal. And so we believe that the technology is without a doubt kind of real at this point. It's really just about now commercialization, execution, scale up. This isn't, they're always going to do research and development, but this isn't an R&D project. They have
Yeah.
product. They can do quantum computing today, at
Mm.
scale. And so, if customers wanted to do that, they can right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I always thought of Dynex as thinking of the team, the network effects. But is it now like a physical chip you can hold, or is it sort of virtualized, emulated neuromorphic layer on top of the existing hardware? Just help us sort of understand that side of it as well.
So there's a couple things. Once again, there's two uh, pillars. One is the software layer on top of the GPUs, and then there's the Apollo chip. And so for the Apollo chip, it's a physical chip
Mm.
that does this massive parallelization that is great for optimization problems. It's a 10,000. It's called probabilistic qubits. Basically, the bits are fluctuating back and forth so fast you can basically say that they're zero and one instead of zero or one. And it's like quadrillions of times a second or something like that. It's an insanely fast chip that's operating, and it's a physical chip, probably the size of your fingernail, but they're not going to be selling these chips. They're this goes back to also the security concerns. You don't want people kind of having these chips and being able to do whatever they want with them. So they're going to be in data infrastructure in the cloud, being able to be accessed through APIs to get access to it. The business model for the company is really, if you want to work with them, you reach out to them, they develop the use case for you. So they'll build it out for you, end-to-end solution, and then they'll basically be able to provide that access through an API. So, if it's weather prediction, they'll build out the weather model using quantum, and be able to provide those 14-day forecasts through to you directly. That way, the companies don't need to learn about how to code in quantum and all the complexities around it. That gets all taken care for them, and then the answers basically be provided to them. So yeah, it's a physical chip, but it's not going to be sold. It'll all be cloud hosted.
Right, okay, yeah. And then how does the chip connect to that broader network?
So they've built out a backend infrastructure to actually determine what which pillar to use, whether that's the GPU software layer, GPU emulation layer, the Apollo chip layer. So it really depends on the use case of which ends up being used. If you end up going for like many variables, the GPU layer might be better because they can do up to 1 million algorithmic qubits. But if you want things that are extremely fast in real time, the Apollo chip might be better. But the chip doesn't need to be housed right next to the GPUs. They can be completely separate. I don't know what the infrastructure on the back end will exactly look like in terms of where things are placed, but you don't need them to necessarily connect with each other. Although I believe that you can build it so that there is some cross communication, but usually it would be just you'd be either using the Apollo chip or the GPUs.
Okay, that makes sense as well. I mean, you kind of have already touched on it, but is there, for maybe Dynex Solve and then comparing to sort of standard GPU, CPUs, or other quantum chips, like, are you able to just quickly recap on the sort of differences between those three things? Yeah.
Sure, and I think it's important to say that it's not necessarily GPU/CPU or Apollo chip. I mean, I think they can be used in conjunction,
Yeah.
and they probably will be. I mean, like GPUs, like I said, are very good for gradient descent. Finding that valley, that local minima.
Mm.
Quantum is very much better at finding the global minima. So not just the locally best answer, but what is truly the best answer or as close to it as you can find. And so I think, for example, in AI, these things are going to be probably used in parallel, or in combination, because they both have their advantages. And I think that'll enable AI to become smarter. It'll be able to do things that it was never able to do before. It'll be able to find a whole set of solutions that would have never been really possible or feasible before the Apollo chip.
Yeah, yeah. And basically the answer to that is there's no normal optimizer in three of those three areas that comes sort of close. So
Yeah, they're classic software optimizers, and sometimes when I people get a little too hung up on the quantum emulation side of things, I just tell people it's a really good software optimizer. I mean, in a way, that's really what it is. It's underplaying it quite a bit, but you can really think of it as it's applying principles from nature, which is the quantum mechanics principles and using that to create optimization type problems. And it's able to do this in a parallel fashion. You're able to do things, many things in parallel. I mean, what's great, for example, about the Apollo chip is it's what's called
Mm,
time asynchronous, which basically means you can be doing a calculation here on the chip and it doesn't impact, doing something here, whereas GPUs, they're, they're time cycles, right? So, things happen and then they need to all sync up and then they move the next, calculation forward. But with the Apollo chip, things can truly be done in parallel. So something can be done here, and you don't need to wait to find out what the answer is here to kind of move on to the next
yeah,
step.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it'll probably be there'll be some hybrid infrastructure that incorporates all components, GPU, CPU, and Apollo chip. I could see that as being a future. But I also think we've just barely scratched the surface on the applications that this Apollo chip could be useful for. I mean, just like once I keep going back to the internet, you could never guess what everyone would use the internet for. I don't think people will fully understand what the quantum Apollo chip will be able to achieve until people start using it. I mean, obviously there's the low-hanging fruit of portfolio optimization, transportation, but I think things in material science and chemistry and biology will also be areas that end up being disrupted.
Yeah, yeah. And I really liked, I mean, now sort of going into application and customers is really good, but I really liked how you said how they sort of, you go to Dynex, they build it tailored for you and your use case. So, what kind of companies would pick up the phone, call Dynex, and what would they be using it for?
Yeah, so we've mentioned a few use cases. So you can imagine funds or banks who want to use it potentially for portfolio optimization. I mean, you can imagine if there are 10,000 stocks out there and you want to maximize your return per unit of risk, and you look at historically, here are the returns, here are the volatility. I mean, and you need to pick 20 out of those 10,000. The amount of commutation combinations can't be done with any supercomputer, even if they had
Yeah.
the lifetime of the universe, just because there are so many different iterations. Whereas, with quantum, yeah, and when I talk about quantum, once again, when I'm talking about the quantum emulation here, that is still getting those quantum outcomes, you're able to actually achieve this. So I could see funds being all over this because if you don't use this, you're going to be left behind. I think transportation, the traveling salesman problem, which we talked about earlier, is another major one. So logistics companies, that's shipping, that's airlines, that's even things that people wouldn't necessarily think about is even when designing chips themselves, figuring out the pathways between the transistors and everything is a traveling salesman problem. I mean,
Mm.
figuring out the optimal routes within chips. So it can be extremely small problems or extremely large ones, like, how to manage your global fleet to shorten the amount of time, use the least amount of fuel, be the
Mm.
most amount efficient, and whatever other constraints you also have. And I mean, we could go on and on from creating new materials by simulating the actual quantum properties of these things to drug discovery and protein folding. The list is kind of endless.
Mm.
Dynex is very good at optimization problems, and these kind of all fall within that category.
Yeah.
And so there are, dozens of different industries that I think could benefit from this.
There's some really good examples there. I mean, the shipping company example, there's plenty of, I mean, even utilizing now potential stock listing, there's plenty of listed companies that Dynex could be speaking to that they need to, make more efficient routes for their shipping companies. Obviously, we've got the Iran situation at the moment, and then actually when you were talking about fund managers, it reminded me of the Billions series where they were constantly buying up sort of algorithms and stuff and trying to be ahead of their competitors. And quantum and Dynex would be an answer there too. So it's very, very exciting. You have already sort of gone over this, but maybe keeping to more the real world examples. I mean, NVIDIA kind of dominates their AI compute right now. So why would a developer or an enterprise or a fund choose Dynex's neuromorphic chip over just throwing it like just a cluster of average sort of GPU clusters?
Yeah, so just to mention again, like I think that there'll be a combination. I think it'll be probably people wanting to use the chip and GPUs. But to get more at the point is that there are some things that just GPUs can't do or can't do efficiently that Dynex does very well. And so, when we talked about, for example, that low-hanging fruit of the portfolio optimization problem, no amount of GPUs in the world, you could take every GPU in the world, and I don't think it would be able to solve that problem
Mm,
of finding the optimal stock portfolio.
mm,
That's the promise of quantum, is being able to find, we're getting into a more and more of a complex world where there's more and more variables, and it's becoming more and more difficult to deal with these things. And at the end of the day, a lot of this does come down to optimization. And some things that you don't think are an optimization problem are. And when there are many potential solutions, but many potential suboptimal solutions, that's where Dynex really shines and where
yeah.
traditional GPUs do not. And so, I think that there are many, many use cases that would enable, yeah, Apollo and their GPU emulation to enable things that just traditional GPUs with the traditional software would not be able to achieve.
And you have already touched on this as well. You've discussed quantum today, but where would you say the chip is in terms of production and scale? Is this still R&D? We've sort of established it's not, but maybe there still are R&D elements, um, sort of limited hardware, or are the chips, yeah, developed and running live
Well,
work?
so if a company is interested in using Dynex today, they can do that and start those conversations. Obviously, you have the conversation, develop the proof of concept and the application for it, and they'll build it. But it's commercial, it's ready. People that are interested, like I said, it's here today. It's not down the road. It's
Mm.
here.
Awesome. And then quickly, are you able to name maybe a few concrete Dynex partners or customers, or just the fact that you can confirm that there are discussions there, or and what sort of workloads they're actually running on the network?
So I would encourage anyone who's interested to learn more to go onto the Dynex website. They have a new revamped website that goes into basically all the information that I've talked to about here and more, including partners with large hospitals in Brazil, and all the white papers and other more detail on the technology. Obviously, where we can't mention, and we're not necessarily privy to everything that's going on within the company in terms of partnerships, but I think that it's going to be an exciting year now that they're commercializing, now that they have this chip ready, and now I think this is kind of the year of the quantum.
And I like how you said, this isn't 5, 10, years down the line, and instead of just saying 5 years every 5 years, as we've been saying, it's today, which is really good. Um, but then this is a sort of brutal question. What's the sort of single biggest risk you guys maybe have in the back of your mind that maybe keeps you up at night about this position?
Well, I mean, with any emerging technology, I mean, there's always risks, and from technology to operations. But I mean, I think they have a very good management team.
Mm.
The technology is proven. My concern, just kind of seeing previous cycles in different technologies, is that the great gets grouped in with the bad. Sometimes where you have a lot of interest in an industry, and all rising tides rise all ships.
Yeah.
All these stocks do really well, even though some of them have no real future, so
Mm.
that there is a pullback. It ends up pulling back everything, the good and the
Mm.
bad. So I don't believe this will be an issue, because I think at the end of the day, they're going to execute and deliver, and people are going to see what they have. But there's always the concern that because this is a complex area. It's quantum. It's, it's not easy to learn. It takes set dedication to understand what it is, how it differs from other things, why it's important. And so, I'm hoping people will see the results and be educated so that they can really see that this is a real scalable solution that's different than all of the other approaches being taken out there. And so, I think that I'm not too worried because I'm a big believer in the technology and the future of
Mm.
this company. But it's always a concern that you end up being grouped in with other companies that you really shouldn't be.
Yeah, that's a really great answer. That's basically for people watching suggested there are no concerns in terms of the actual tech and everything that's involved. It's purely just, markets. You had the dot-com bubble. AI doesn't look like it's slowing down, but you guys have got the right quantum, the right AI pieces, which is why this title is something along the lines of these are the only two quantum AI plays you need. So very promising. Um, and then maybe lastly on Dynex, the sort of single biggest sort of catalyst or thing that needs to go right in the next sort of 12 to 24 months. Is it those just flow of partners coming in, would you say?
Yeah, I think now it's game on, it's commercialization, it's scale. I think there's a great window here as there's a lot of interest in quantum. I know a lot of major corporations are looking at it, and so it's really just kind of go out there and get partnerships, get sales, become more well known because at the end of the day, this is a pretty still unknown company, misunderstood company. And so, I think that, there's going to be a lot of education going over this year. And at the end of the day, once these, once they get partnerships, once they get sales, people will start, I think, looking at this much more closely. So I think that that's going to be, now that they have the chip, really going to be happening over the near term.
Yeah, yeah. We'll get on to HyperCycle now. And Tufi, you've said that's how you introduced before. The Toda protocols, how you also, slowly got in and knew about HyperCycle. And we've been told by Tufi this isn't a crypto, it's, machine to machine infrastructure. As an investor holding this, and maybe others also watching holding this, how do you explain HyperCycle to someone who's never heard of it, 30 seconds or less?
Yeah, actually, hypercycle at its core is pretty simple. It's obviously the tech that's complicated behind
Mm,
it, but it just enables AIs to speak to, transact with securely other AIs directly peer to peer with no intermediaries.
mm,
And they enable this through the Chota protocol, which is a network technology that enables this. So, you can truly have one AI pay another AI without having to go through banks or blockchains or any other third parties. So you can, AIs which transact in milliseconds and at micro sense,
mm.
can now do so, which was just not feasible before. And you can do it in a very secure manner.
Yeah, yeah. And then that more complicated stack. Maybe let's start with sort of what is an AI agent, and a node and a node factory.
So when most people talk about AI agents, when most people talk even about AI these days, they're talking about large language models. But obviously there's a whole host of different AI type models. But really around agents, it's using the LLM that everyone knows today, your Claude, your Chat, your Gemini, and so forth. And basically, agents are just AIs that can do things in the real world. They're not just a text box where you ask it a question and it gives you a response or does some research. It actually goes out and can take actions online. So it could, plan a trip for you. It can, write code and implement it for you. It can do a whole bunch of different things. And so people are getting very excited as well as potentially also very worried about, potential job loss and, because it can now do things that were usually only people could do. So, now you have all these AI agents in the world that are becoming very interesting because in some cases they're able to do really great things really fast that would take humans a lot longer to do. But on the other hand, they're not perfect. They still make mistakes. They still hallucinate. And so, I was actually having a conversation with someone about this a while ago about how, like I use AI and how it should be used. And, I kind of say like, listen, AI is a great still tool where you have knowledge about the area that you are using it for, but you can't just blindly trust it because, it's very good at coming out with answers that are believable that could be completely wrong.
Or that it
And so
wants you to hear. Yeah, no, yeah.
exactly. They've become very good at bullshitting. And so when I use it, at least I know when it's making a mistake. But if you don't know when it's making a
Mm.
mistake, that's when it becomes dangerous.
Absolutely, yeah. And then just quickly, yeah, and then sort of a node and node factory. You're able to just sort of summarize those quickly for people before we go further.
Sure. So node factories, you could think of as kind of like the car manufacturing facility. They produce the cars, in this case, the cars being the nodes. So node factories produce nodes. And what nodes do is that's kind of when combined with the tokens, that becomes the software layer, the software bundle, where the AIs, whether it's your large language model, or your optical character recognition technology, AI model, your whatever favorite model, goes into these software node bundles,
Mm,
and that enables them to do the transaction and the peer-to-peer aspect. So
mm,
you need the software bundles for the AIs to be able to do this. It's the network layer that enables them to communicate and transact securely and peer-to-peer. So node factories. When you own a node factory, you might be selling the nodes that it produces to people who want to basically partake in this Internet of AI.
right. Okay. So that's sort of the maybe the founding fathers of the tech stack might be the ones that own more node factories than others, and then they can sell those nodes to.
Anyone can own node factories. I mean, you can buy them. They're for sale online. You can also buy the individual nodes. Maybe you want to buy a node factory because you want the nodes that get produced from the node factories for your own use. I mean, you don't have to sell it. You can actually utilize it to create your own AI company if you want.
Yeah, yeah. And 3D has kind of extreme exposure at that sort of node factory level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't disclose everything, but we are owners of that as well as the tokens, and we've been there since kind of the beginning. I mean, we're kind of founding investors into HyperCycle, so we have good exposure there, especially as this grows, and we think this could be big and grow a lot. I mean, this is the internet of AI. I mean, imagine owning a piece of the internet, and that this is a technology that, despite what see the headlines with all these different AI companies building, none of them can do what HyperCycle enables. And so we still very much believe this is the future of AI networking and communication.
Yeah, yeah. And then to help sort of investors and people who own part of the network understand even further, or new people, walk us through like a single flow of a transaction. And so, for example, maybe an AI app is sort of missing a function or trying to solve a problem. It connects to HyperCycle. Tasks are then routed to the agents and the nodes. How does sort of payment and settlement layer actually work with the tokens, the fees, and the settlement across those sort of free free.
Yeah, so I mean, within each software bundle, you have what's called a transaction machine that enables this. There's a bunch of different components within the software bundle that enable the AI to run, for it to transact, and so forth, and to make sure it actually gets paid for when work is done, and so forth. But in terms of how it works, where you have, let's say, an AI model that needs to reach out to another one. I mean, you could end up having 10 different models it needs to find. Everything would be on the hypercycle network, but that's pretty easy to set up and integrate. And then, the AI would find the one that best suits its need based off of usually some sort of score in terms of, does this AI, have a good reputation? Does it have strong uptime? Does it, give a lot of the correct answers? And then it'll choose, and does it meet the needs that it's that the
Mm,
AI asked for? So, then it will, send that, information over to that other AI. And, if it can do it, it'll do the transaction, transaction machine to transaction machine, a smart contract based where, you only
yeah.
get paid for when it's done. And this is all done on the hypercycle network. And you can do any type of currency you kind of want. You can do, stable coins or Bitcoin or,
Mm.
regular, I believe, US dollars. Like it's pretty currency agnostic.
Yeah, yeah. And you guys are already earning revenue from this, which suggests the network is up and running. There are kind of enough AIs on the network communicating with each other. But, for this to really scale up, presumably there needs to be as many AIs as possible on there so they can all communicate with each other.
Yeah, and I think that's part of why it's Tufi is dealing with countries, to really help get that network effect. I
Mm,
mean, they've announced working with the YMCA, which has 65 million members, and getting people involved through there. And so, and there's also a lot of open source models you can put on as well. So you can end up having a lot of AI. And now with agentic ability, you can already have them transacting without necessarily having the human in the loop, just to show the demo and the use case and have some real world applicability. But I think something, I think Mosaic, which we can talk a bit about, will help also catalyze the networking effect of HyperCycle and potentially be the kind of first killer app, which basically enables anyone to take whatever information, Hector, you're very good at, doing, IR and outreach and interviewing. Well, you could basically create a digital twin of yourself that you own based off of all of your files that you've ever created,
mm,
all of your conversations with ChatGPT or whatever AI model, put it into Mosaic, which is your basically digital twin where you own it, and it can go out there on the Hypercycle network and make money for you by offering your services based off of everything you know to everyone else. And
mm.
so we really like this idea. I think it's in beta. It should be released shortly, and it's going to show the real capabilities of HyperCycle, where you're really in control of all the information you have. It's not Google taking your data or OpenAI. It's you're in control of it, and you also don't have to worry about the classical security issues you would for regular Claude bot or whatever agent model you're using. So, I think Mosaic will be a great use case and also potentially be the catalyst to the network effect.
Yeah, I really like that. I mean, at the beginning we touched on that sort of privacy, how Anthropic and certain things are being banned by certain governments. But Hypercycle is kind of that layer in between which sorts out the privacy as well. And then also, we can even see the hurdles that need to be solved for the sort of exponential growth, which is just that network effects and more people joining the network. And really appreciate your answer about how Tufi's attacking this from like an institutional level without losing the sort of decentralized element of Hypercycle and the privacy. So that's really really good. And then he's
Yeah.
described this as kind of like a $quadrillion opportunity. I mean, that's like a jaw-dropping number. I've seen it also said in other interviews of other influencers. As a professional investor, do you sort of believe that number? Is it like a maybe a hook to draw some more investors in? And how do you stress test a claim like that?
I don't know if Tufi was referring to kind of the whole AI economy kind of growing by that, and he has talked about large the potential of hypercycle and where it could go. And I mean, I think what you look at is, well, what's the size of the AI market? How fast is it growing? It's growing 4x year on year. And if it is going to be the next internet, but potentially bigger, I mean, what's the value of the internet? Every company is on the internet. Imagine owning a piece of that, or having a toll payment every time there's a transaction done on the internet. I mean, that would obviously be a crazy valuation, and the AIs are just going to create more and more value most likely in the future. So as that grows, and hypercycle is kind of the one that's powering all of this, that I mean the numbers can get pretty crazy. I don't know what that number would look like, but it's a very big opportunity because AI is the biggest thing right now. It's will probably continue to be so. It's growing extremely fast. And to be able to be kind of the platform from which everything else is kind of run on top of, I mean, ha has tremendous value.
Yeah, yeah, no, I can see how that's then sort of it's just believable based on everything we've already discussed. I mean, I do know you have to go, so we'll just touch on the last one or two questions here. Um, with Tufi's also discussed sort of Google, A2A, Microsoft, Cisco, Mastercard. So they're all sort of building into the Internet of AI. So that sort of concern about those AIs coming in. Um, but none of them have true peer-to-peer agent to agent yet. I mean, how does HyperCycle turn those giants from potential competitors into customers?
No, I think they actually could be customers. I think they can still integrate, and like you say, they still lack the interoperable peer-to-peer networks. I mean, in a lot of ways, they're still intranets as opposed to internets, and so I think they can all plug in. Once again, not nobody can do what Hypercycle can do in terms of the peer-to-peer networking. Now, like that, I think can benefit all of the major players as well as the smaller players. So I don't think necessarily that it needs to be competitive. I actually think it's just showing that we are on the right track of what we are doing. I mean, Hypercycle talked about AI to AI agents in 2022. It's happening now. We've talked about, the internet of AI, having AIs of different kinds connect with each other. Others are doing it now. I think we're on the right path. I don't think that, this is necessarily going to be competition. I think the way Hypercycles works and built is to be extremely collaborative with all these technologies. But I think we're quite happy to see the path that everyone is taking is the same one that we've been taking now or the company's been taking for a number of years.
That's a really good way to summarize that. I mean, I guess new people watching, who's maybe seen the interview now wants to get involved. What's the best route? Is it sort of 3D shares and Hypercycle directly, and then Node Factory, AI agents? Um, how do you
I,
think?
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not always so simple, and obviously, things have increased in value. Obviously, I'm biased here, but 3D gives great exposure to Dynex and Hypercycle without having to deal with crypto or understanding how nodes work or how to manage them, as well as giving exposure to many, many other companies in our portfolio that we obviously didn't discuss here today, but we're very
Mm,
bullish on. Things have taken longer, obviously, than we'd hoped or expected. We don't control the companies. A lot of things we thought were happening last year, I think are going to happen this year. I mean, it's never a straight line. These are cutting edge companies. They're early stage companies. Things happen, but the great thing is now things like it looks like a catalyst for a lot of these companies in our portfolio. So we're excited for this year. We think it's going to be an exciting year, and it's going to be a good year for 3D. And we still trade at a major discount to our net asset value, and people are interested. There's the 3D, gives exposure to all these companies that we spoke about today and many others.
mm, mm. And then very finally, we've touched on, I think, AI network effects, growing Hypercycle, and then Dynex as customers. Are those the two maybe things to watch over the next 12 months in each of those companies, or would you like to give maybe a metric for each for those two
Well,
companies?
I think partnerships. I think revenue. I mean, from Dynex side, it's going to be, yeah, partnerships and revenue and different milestones, technology, IP, patents. On Hypercycle, you'll probably be able to see a bit more, because everyone will be, or many people will be earning revenue and being able to. It's in more of an open network, in terms of you can see things happening. Dynex obviously will go public and then there'll be more disclosure. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of it comes down to, yeah, for Hypercycle users, revenue, partnerships, and for just like any other company, same with
Mm,
Dynex, you want to see the partnerships, the technology develop, and so forth. And both of them have been going down their roadmap and hitting different milestones, and we think they'll continue to do so. And so I think, yeah, keep an eye out for both of them.
mm.
I'd say check out the website for both of them, as it's a great source of information.
Yeah, no, I like that answer as well because normally a red flag looking at something or a project is, oh, we're looking forward to developing this or doing this. It's like, well, I thought you guys were supposed to already have developed it, and that's what you're
A lot,
saying.
a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, a
so
lot of ideas.
yeah,
Yeah.
but actually they're there, so that's good. But yeah, thank you very much, Jackson, and I'll see you very soon. Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks, Hector. Enjoyed that. This was great. Thank you so much. Take care.